In other words, think about a rebuttal. What are you trying to do with any of the four rebuttals? Yes.
You're trying to tell the judge exactly why you win from evidence that has already been presented in the round from the constructives. You're constructing a story.
And you can read more evidence in rebuttal. You can't make new points, but reading more evidence is real good. Yeah, but, okay, so yeah, you're trying to tell the judge why you win. What else? Uh-huh.
You're also trying to conclude and make sure that the judge heard all of what you said before.
Sure. You don't want anything to get lost in the shuffle. You don't want the judge to forget. What else? So far, so good. I mean, we're all right on target here. What else does a rebuttal accomplish? I mean, why would Dr. Galloway, fine coach that he is, and Mr. Matthew, Ross, and all the gang, why would they put so much emphasis on rebuttals here? Let's think some more. Yes, Davis?
Usually that's what the round comes down to. Like, so the judge wishes to see just based on the reasons to vote and the rebuttals.
Sure, sure. It's the end of the debate. It's what the debate comes down to. I think there's another thing you try to accomplish with a rebuttal, too. There's two ways to look at everything in this world. And sometimes, in your rebuttal, if you're really good at it, we're going to try to teach you ways to get the judge to look at the debate the way you want him to look at the debate, or the way you want her to look at the debate. You're trying to, it's a mind game to some degree, a debate is. It's a competition. It's you against them. And they've got some good points in a good debate, and that's what we're training you here for at Samford. The hard debates, not the easy ones where you go in there and beat a team that doesn't know what they're doing. A good debate against a team that does know what's doing. And you have a lot of respect for them, but you know that at the end, in those last four speeches, there's going to be one of those two teams is going to win, one's going to lose. That's why we call it a competition. And so one of the things you're trying to do in that rebuttal is you're trying to put things from your point of view. And that means that's going to be especially important in first negative rebuttal. Because yes, you're trying to win your arguments as is correctly stated. But you're also trying to keep them from being able to win their arguments and make them look any way they want to make them look. And that means you have balance. You have a respect for what they're trying to do. In other words, a good rebuttalist thinks like three people in the round. They can think a little bit like a judge and say, if I'm a fair judge, what is it going to take for us to win the round? What are they likely to win the round? Why is what we're going to win going to be what they're going to win? You have to think like your partner a little bit. What does my partner expect me to accomplish in this speech? And then you have to think like your opponent. What's my opponent trying to do? How can they take this argument I'm speaking on right now and make it look like a win for them, and how can I take that away from them? So it's really exciting. There's a lot of, and one of the things I'd recommend to you at the very beginning here, at the beginning of the lecture, this is usually something that's tacked on to the end of a lecture, but at the beginning of the lecture I want to say, doing your rebuttals over is the best way in the world to improve your debate. We started doing that here at Samford early on with our college team. We just had a rule that if you lost a debate, were disappointed in the debate, or didn't score real high in the debate, the kids would just automatically come by my office sometime during the day after the tournament, and they'd do the rebuttal over. And they'd just stop in, like it's a 5-minute rebuttal in college at the time, it's 6 now, it was 5 minutes. So they'd just run by the office, they'd give the rebuttal, we'd talk about it a little bit together. If I thought they're coming along, making good progress, that'd be it. If I didn't, I'd say, well, let's do that again in a couple of days. Why don't you work on it, work on this one argument a little bit, and then we'd go ahead and do it again. And that's the best way in the world to get better. Right away, our win-loss record on negative went up like 15%, just immediately, as a team. I don't mean one team, I mean the whole squad went up because we started improving really fast. And the best way to improve is through the debate. Now, in the back there, pal, those go.
I'm sorry, they wouldn't.
Yeah, you're mine here for an hour and Jake's. So you got two first negatives here today working with you. Jake's been a first negative for what?
Off and on for a couple of years.
Yeah, and I was a first negative in college for 4 years and off and on in high school. I was first and second negative in high school. So we like the position. We see a lot of potential in the position. We see a lot of debates that are wanting first negative rebuttal. And so we want to give you some tips. First thing I want to talk about today is what you do to get ready for the first negative rebuttal. In other words, and you can just number these, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Number one, okay, you've given the first negative speech. Okay, the affirmative comes up, gives their speech, and you come up and you give your speech. Now, in your speech, you will notice that basically, I'm sure your coaches are teaching you to basically make all of your arguments. In other words, let's just say, hypothetically, in this debate, you're going to make one topicality argument, you're going to make 3 disadvantages, you're going to make a counter plan, and let's say you're going to go back to their case, and you're going to make 5 comebacks, 5 separate independent comebacks to their solvency, in which you say their plan is not going to work. You probably do more than that, but that's, let's just say, what did I say? 1 topicality, 1 counter plan, 3 disadvantages, and 5 case arguments. So you've done that. Now, it used to be, just like 20 years ago or so, the first negative would make topicality and all of the case arguments. The second negative would make, in the counter plan, the first negative. And then the second negative would make all the disadvantages. And there was nothing wrong with that. There was some really good debating done at that level. But people get smarter and activities improve. And so what the negatives went, they went, suppose we give short versions or shells of all of our arguments in first negative. Then we're going to force the second affirmative to lay all of their cards out on the table and give all of their comebacks in second affirmative. And then we're going to have 2 speeches in a row. Now, somebody do the math for me. How long is the second negative constructive and the first negative rebuttal together?
30 minutes.
Pardon me?
13 minutes.
13. And how many minutes worth of speaking are you answering? 8. Okay, do the math on that. That's an advantage, isn't it? And so that's what negatives did. They said, well, doggone it, why don't we make all of our points in the first speech short versions of the argument. We call them shells, as I mentioned. And then let's force the affirmative team to give their points. And then let's gang up on them. Let's divide our original arguments and their original arguments up. And let's gang up on them. And let's take our 13 minutes in a row that we have. And let's really punish them on those arguments. Because they've already had to tell us everything. See, it used to be, you didn't know until after first affirmative rebuttal what the affirmative team was going to say about your disadvantages. And they could make several turnarounds. They could do all kinds of crazy things with your disadvantages. And you didn't have as much prep time left. There were bad things a lot of times. But now negatives have wised up. So that's what you've done. You've listened to the affirmative. You've given all your shells. And you've not only, and I want to emphasize this here, you've not only given your aggressive argument, your offense, like the counter plan, the topicality, and the disadvantages, you've also done the defensive arguments, which is against their case. And I want to really emphasize that. There's too many high school teams nowadays just making their offensive arguments and giving the affirmative team their case practically. Maybe making one little argument against it, or maybe not making very many at all. Don't do that. Don't give them, because then we come to the end of the debate. Your objective is to make them look weak and yourself look strong, and they don't look weak at all. You've given them everything they started the debate with. So we don't do that. Just let's take that out of our vocabulary and be aggressive. Okay. Then the second affirmative comes up and answers your arguments. That's step 2. 3. You get a good flow sheet. In other words, the second affirmative has spoken. You're cross-examining the second affirmative. Remember, the first negative does. And so if you didn't get some of their comebacks down, you have a chance to ask them about them. After your speech, while your partner is prepping, you can go over and get the comments off their flow sheet. So I didn't understand. You made 14 answers to this disadvantage. I only got the first 11 of them. Can you tell me what 12, 13, 14 were? And you get those out. So you get all the goods. And that's the purpose for giving your shells and then making the affirmative team give theirs. You want to get everything they said. You don't want to drop anything they said. And so you have done that now. And so now you're ready to go into your speech and your partner's speech. Now your partner's speech is first, which means that before you give your rebuttal, you got to have a little chit-chat with your partner. And you got to say, what are we going to do And by that, you mean, what are we gonna go for? Who is gonna go for what? You don't both go for the same thing, do you? Because then your time advantage would not exist anymore, would it? In other words, if my partner was Mark back there, and Mark Strauss, and he went for the disadvantage one in his second negative constructive, and I'm the first negative rebuttal, and I went for disadvantage one too, well, we'd be duplicating, and that would be really bad. Because we'd be giving up our time advantage, and then the other team would probably beat us. And so what we do is you divide it up. So let's pretend that Mark and I are talking, he and I are chatting a little bit. I said, what do you think, man? He goes, well, I think they pretty well took out disadvantage 3. I don't think that's a very good disadvantage. I said, I agree with you, that's not going anywhere. He said, but I think the topicality argument still has some promise. I think the counterplan is going really well. Disadvantage 2 is going really well. And disadvantage 1, some chance. And I didn't think they got back and did very much at all with our solvency argument. So let's, especially the even numbered one, 2 and 4. So we talked about it. I said, well, what do you think? What are you going to go for, and what do you want me to go for? And so that's what we talked about. And there's several criteria we use for deciding who's going to go for what. Like, does either one of you have a favorite argument? Like maybe the counter plan and the disadvantage number 2 are just his favorite arguments in the world. He researches them every week. He updates the evidence every week. He knows them backwards and forwards. They're like his best friend. And maybe that topicality argument's my favorite argument. I just love it. So, okay, that's telling you a couple things right there, doesn't it? I'm probably going to go for the topicality argument. He's probably going to go for the counter plan and disadvantage number, what did I say, 2. Okay? And then, is one of you better at substantive or theory arguments? Like there's substantive argument, like space junk is a substantive argument. Counter plan competitiveness is a theory argument. Some people are just better at one than others. Had a very good team here at Samford, finished in the top 10 in the United States. And one of the guys was really good at substantive. And one of them was really good at debate theory. So when we divided it up, one guy would take the theory and one guy would take the substance. I mean, that's just what they tend to be. So that's even. You're both good in theory, you're both good in substance. Then, is there any argument that you and only you have researched? Like maybe I've done all the research on those case arguments. Remember those 5? We're going to go for number 2 and 4. So maybe I've done all that research. So I'd be a logical person to do that, wouldn't I? So we talk about it, and then I ask another question. Are there any arguments we want to drop? Well, who's going to drop it and kick it out? That's another question. Is your partner, what combination of arguments do you want to take in? We've decided that. And then here's another thing you think about. Is there one of your arguments that you do want to win that the other team has read a whole bunch of evidence against that you just don't understand? I mean, they've read 15 pieces of evidence against it, and it's a good argument, and you really want to go for it. But you know that you're going to have to look at the affirmative evidence first before you can beat it. And you're going to have to read it. Well, that would be something that you would probably do, wouldn't it? Because who speaks second in the negative line? Pretend like you're the first negative.
The one end.
You do. And by the way, how much prep time do you have going into the negative line? Let's add that up in our minds. Pardon me? 11 is every bit of 11. And if you don't cheat on the second affirmative constructives, and try to steal a little of their time to go write some things down and work it out. But yes, because you don't know what they're saying yet, but yes, you have 11 minutes prep time. You have 8 minutes of your partner's speech and the 3 minutes that your partner is cross-examining. So if one of you is going to go back and read through all that evidence and try to make sense out of it, because it sounds like really good, dangerous evidence that could really hurt you. And so you can't just get up and say, take all their evidence and lump it together. You're going, no, it's good evidence. We've got to answer it. We've got to have some answers so they're better cards. So that would be one that I would take too, wouldn't it? So it doesn't turn out that that's an issue. So in this hypothetical round, let's say that I'm going to take the topicality argument, and I'm going to take the 2 case arguments, number 2 and number 4, and that's going to be it for my rebuttal. My partner is going to take the counter plan, which they didn't do a very good job on. It won't take a whole long time for him to do that, and the first 2 disadvantages and answer those. Now, it's different. In some rounds, maybe my partner and I would talk, maybe Mark and I talk, and he'd say, well, you know, I just don't think we can do it all. If you do the topicality in those two case arguments, I don't think I can do any more than the counterplan and the second disadvantage. How about if we kick the first disadvantage and the third disadvantage out? I'm going, all right, I mean, we can only do what we can do in 13 minutes. We got to answer everything they say, so that's good. Okay, so we made our decision. And Mark's talked to me, and I've talked to him, and so I'm going to go for topicality. I'm going to go for the two case arguments, and Mark is going to go for the counterplan, the two disadvantage, but he's going to start on the second disadvantage. So if he runs out of time, there are no turnarounds on the first disadvantage. He's going to start on the second disadvantage and try to work his way down through that. So we know now it's time for my partner to go up and give his speech. Meanwhile, I am prepping my speech out. And I have, at that point, I'm not listening to my partner's second negative constructive speech. Say that out loud with me. Do not listen.
Do not listen
to your partner's
to your partner's
second negative constructive speech. Because then you're not using the prep time, are you?
No.
You'd be surprised how many people do that. You'll watch people and they're staring at their partner while their partner's giving the speech, and you're thinking, don't do that. Get that flow sheet out of yours and start writing out your comebacks for what you're going to say. So in my case, I've got topicality, and I've got those two case advantages. I mean, two case solvency arguments that I'm going to go for. And so I've got my hands full. And then I'm going to, I've got everything organized. I've got my evidence all laid out. I've got backup briefs ready, on those two solvency arguments on case we're going to go for. I've got like 2 more cards I'm going to read on each one of those. I've got I've been practicing my topicality comebacks, and I'm ready on those. I've got backup evidence, backup definitions. I'm ready to go. So I sit down while my partner's giving his speech or her speech, while Mark's giving his speech, and I'm just taking notes like crazy. I'm writing out everything, because let's say the other team had 8 comebacks to the topicality argument, and then 2 comebacks to each of those case arguments, but they're still good arguments. So I'm working out, I'm doing like, here's what they said, arrow over what I want to say, here's the evidence that I'm going to read. So I'm doing all that, or I'm doing it on my PC or whatever, but I'm doing it somewhere. I'm doing it on my laptop, but I'm getting it done. I'm getting my speech all ready to go, okay? So now's the time comes, so that's step number general, step like large 2 here. Is everybody clear so far? And a lot of these things are real important. Like, do you work during your partner's speech? Like crazy. Do you listen to your partner's speech? Do you answer the same things your partner's answering? And there's only one exception, that every once in a long while, your partner will run out of time and say, I didn't answer 11 on this first disadvantage. Can you mind doing that for me? And you can do that, but that doesn't happen on a regular basis. Okay, so you don't need any prep time now, do you? You've been sitting there for 11 minutes, so your partner gets done with their speech, they're cross-examined for 3 minutes, and it's time for you to go. So you're just up there right behind your partner, you're pushing your partner away from the podium, and you're ready to go. Okay, so you do a couple things. First thing you do, you give, and we're now in the speech itself, you tell the judge what your roadmap is going to be. You say, I will go for the topicality argument, and then case solvency. And so why does that help the judge? What does that do for him? Mm-hmm.
They know what pieces of paper to get out.
And that's so important, because we don't want the judge lost, do we?
No.
When the judge is lost, sometimes you lose. You don't want, a confused judge is not a good thing. A confused opponent is all right, but a confused judge is bad. So you say, okay, so the judge gets out his T sheet, he gets out his case arguments, and he's ready to go, or she's ready to go. And so you're ready to go. And so you do a little bit of line-by-line argumentation at this point. Now, I talked with the novice group today already about this, but if there's one thing that wins debates, it's line-by-line argumentation. If there's one thing that people do at a good workshop and from good teams, there's only one fundamental to the debate that almost every coach in the world agrees on, and that is answer everything the other team said about your argument. In other words, if they said if they had 8 comebacks against my topicality argument, how many of those 8 do I have to answer?
All of them.
If they had 16, how many do I have to answer?
All of them.
Yeah, I think the most I've ever heard was, I heard Redlands University from California make 29 answers to one disadvantage against the University of Utah. That was quite a few. And the guy got right up and said they only give 29 answers and just rips down through them, answers them all. But, you know, it was a little irony there in his voice, but he did answer them. Okay, so you've got them all, you're all ready to go. So you say, on topicality, our argument is here, and you explain, like, you say it's topicality. If there's only one, you don't have to know, you just say on the topicality argument, and you would say something like, the argument is that they are not in space, they are from Earth to space, not in space. And so, you know, that's enough. Okay, and then you said they made 8 answers, and you start answering. A couple things judges like, they all like it when you answer them in order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And you just go down through and you answer. You say on 1, they said a counter definition, but it's unreasonable for this reason. 2, they say we meet, but no, they don't meet, because there's no way in the world they go up into space. I mean, they have a telescope that's nailed to the ground in Wyoming. Number 3, they have, and you go right down through. Sometimes you need to read evidence, sometimes you don't. Sometimes there's already been evidence in the argument that applies, but it never hurts to read another card. More evidence is usually more power. It makes that point of yours bigger on the judge's flow sheet, makes the judge less likely to forget it. It makes you more credible. So you go down through and you answer all 8 of those one at a time. You just pick them up. You just pick them off. It's like having 8 like obnoxious birds on a telephone wire. You're just going to knock them all off. And that's what makes debate debate. And at first, it's hard to do that. It's not natural for us to do that. Line by line argumentation, one of the reasons it makes winners out of people that do it is not very many people really do it well. Because it's totally against human nature. I mean, watch adults argue. Watch people my age argue. Do they answer each other? I mean, do you ever watch these shows? I mean, pick your favorite news network or whether you like Crossfire or Fox News. I mean, I don't care. I'm not in here to politics today, but watch them. They don't even respond to each other.
They just get louder.
Pardon me?
They just get louder.
They get louder, but they don't. There's more heat than light, right? Okay, and so that's not natural to do. As human beings, we're basically kind of self-centered. And so we want to just get up and say again what we said. Remember what I told you in the topicality argument. I told you this and this and this and this, and the judges sit back and go, because they already know. You told them in the first speech what your topicality argument was. You can tell them like in 3 or 4 words, but don't be, but get into the line by line argumentation. And how many of those 8 do you have to answer?